Hi, welcome to the sixth part of the Carework uh, lecture of the Gender Economics course, which was basically the course where we are kind of making an introduction to the feminist economics. Um, in this part, we will start, well, looking to the two chapters of Nancy Folbre's book, Valuing Children. Uh, in the first chapter, we are looking to, which is the sixth chapter, we will basically look to the how to define time and money spent for the childcare. And in the second part, basically, we will add the money and time together first by assigning monetary value of the um, time spent for the children. And in the first case, actually, we have the definition of leisure and work criteria is discussed. Well, as a starting point, we can say here, well, work is usually taught as a type of activities where you create a product, and that product will actually later consumed by other people. Of course, in case of children, that might be something difficult to address. I mean, what product you are actually creating, which you are consuming later? Is child a product? Is basically, do you consume child later? And is child a product because, well, in the sense that, I mean, you get some utility of raising it or time spent with your child? All of these are difficult questions to answer. So in that sense, actually, it is because it is difficult to address. All these problems are difficult to address. We might think it in another way. I mean, from the child's perspective, there are certain works to be done to allow the child to remain alive. And here, actually, well, the question becomes whether looking for a child is a leisure activity or work. Well, that might be a question, of course, in terms of asking whether looking for a child is kind of a fun activity, and that's why the parents are doing that activity or not. And Nancy Folber gives answer to this question in a let's say in a later in the next chapter, basically. And there the main answer will become, and that will also become that she will also basically name the monetization criterion. If I am, for example, painting my house, and I create a value, I create some product for me, and instead of painting my house, I could actually hire someone, a painter, and could have paid $10 to that painter, and that painter could have painted that house. But the point is, I might be also enjoying painting the house. So in that case, in the end, I both have a painted house, which is something I enjoy, and I have spent an activity which I might be liking to some extent. And in that case, that having experienced that activity might also be a plus for me. And in that sense, actually, I might have two different benefits. So, in addition to the monetary benefits, but let's say I'm painting the house for my friend. In that case, actually, from that person's perspective, I am creating a value which is equal to let's say $10 per hour to my friend. And since I'm creating that value for my friend, that friend, in case of market rules, at least, because the value of my work in the market is that much, basically needs to pay me that amount. And here we are actually arriving to the third person criterion, both in terms of time and then later. Well, the third person criterion basically states, well, if we are actually providing an activity to anyone, that could be our children, which could be provided by a different individual, which could be hired from the market. In that case, that activity is a kind of cost, because we are doing a kind of work there. Even if we like it, we are still performing a work for a certain person, which might be our own child. Here, of course, we might ask whether any kind of third person's work, for example, a child care worker or a nanny, can be equivalent of the work of mothers. So mothers might be given, or fathers might be giving something more than regular child care workers, and that's a big question actually, whether they are really giving or not. But even if it's so, this additional element doesn't decrease the fact that they are also spending some time. So they are also putting some work, which is equivalent of the work done by them, by people who could be hired by the market. And here actually, how do we, having set this as our main criteria, how do we count the time in this case? And here actually you might also say actually the third person might still be missing one thing, which is actually responsibility of the child is upon the parents, which is also an additional thing which is not counted by this third person criterion. And this is something that is will include the whole time we basically. To some extent, however, nowadays actually this supervision is also taken over by certain people, the guardians who are paid to supervise, for example, elderly people. Even that is actually nowadays something that is provided by the market. But in this actually, while counting time in this text, basically, Nancy problem doesn't count that time. I mean the overall supervision. But you might also supervise the child while, for example, you might also supervise the child in the sense that you don't let that child alone in the house. That's a narrower sense of supervision. A wider sense of supervision might, even if the child is in the school or in his friend's house, still you are responsible for the child. So you should know always what the child is doing. Narrow sense is that you don't let the child alone when the child is inside of the house. And in that sense, that supervision doesn't necessarily be done by the parents. My friend might say, okay, I am going to a supermarket. Can you look after my child? Now, in that case, I'm supervising the child in narrow sense. Still, in the broad sense, my friend is supervising the child. So, having defined, and here we are looking to the Nancy Pobre actually disregards when she calculates the wider sense of supervision, and she takes into account, let's say, narrower sense of supervision. Looking after the child, not leaving the child alone. And in that sense, actually, should we count that time? Because I might be supervising my friend's child, for example, but I might actually at the same time, for example, recording this video. Maybe in my house there is a child now sleeping in the bedroom, or just in front of me playing with his or her toys. There is no child actually in the house, if you are curious. I'm alone in the house now. So I just in narrow sense, supervising the child doesn't mean I'm not able to do any other activity. Is this a kind of work? Well, it still restricts me. I cannot go outside of the house. And whenever the child needs me, if the child was now playing with the toys and there's something happens, he gets injured, for example, and he needs me, I immediately need to shut this video and help the child. So, Nancy Pobre compares this with the firefighters who are working on call. So always in the firefighting stations, also in police stations and the hospitals, there are certain people who are not actively working at the time, but they are on call. Basically, whenever they are called, they should be working, and that's part of this. Waiting is part of the work. Actually, in nowadays also, some of these kinds of workers are actually they might also may need to go to hospital whenever they are called by the phone. But this is part of their this is also part of their work in a way. Sometimes they are not paid for this emergency responses, but still it is the fact that they will go to their workplace whenever they are recalled is part of the working process actually, and it is affecting the time which they are actually not at the workplace. So that time, this secondary time should also be included, and you might also think a third person who will take this supervision, not exact care, but the supervision of the child. What will you can you have that? Can you hire that kind of a person? Yes, you can hire that kind of person. So third person, with the third person criterion, we could count this on-call supervision as kind of work. We have already talked on employment, where we have said in case of employment, usually people are decreasing the time they take from the leisure and spend more time with their children in different sense, especially the mothers, especially not the fathers but the mothers. Because mothers are usually more bonded with the children. Also, this principle of love, I think, is more true for the mothers. For fathers, the time they can spend with the child is less, and especially not the activity where they feel the dependency of their child to them, physical, I mean, on contact dependency. Rather, they spend time with having fun with the children, kind of. And indirect care skill refers to this firefighter thing. I mean, this on-call. Care is part of the work basically, and having done that, Nancy Folbre has actually has created a chart based on surveys how the children are spending their time in one parent household, single parent households, and basically two parent household, and these are the case with two children. Well, 48 and 47% of the time is for sleeping and personal care, which they do basically. They care for themselves. 16-17% they are awake but not with an adult. The adult might still be caring for him or her, but they don't have an activity. They don't experience an activity with an adult. 13 and 16% more in the single parent households with an institution. 2-3% activity with a non-relative, 2-3% activity with a relative, and 19-14% less in case of single parent household. Note that both parents are available, so some activities might be done with father and some activities with the mother in case of this household. Here you have only one parent, either father or mother. So 19-14% an activity with the parent, basically. Well, we have very little time left, but let me just start looking to the data. So here you have the broader chart. This is still time, but here actually you summarize both the time and well, basically all the information that is summed up is summarized. You can look to the details, by the way, on the let's say more detailed data on time. But we will basically in this lecture look to this summary. But that thing we will do after well, in the next part, because we are getting close to the 15 minutes mark. So see you in the next part.